it's just about time to bring on our second guest of the evening here, Coach, and somebody that you and I know pretty well. The voice of high school football from 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Brett Rump joining us now. Brett, good evening to you.
Good evening, guys.
You got your Final Four shirt on in our video feed. You had to represent. It's not a pretty Boilermakers Final Four shirt.
You should be banned from that shirt. With that shirt, it's football season still.
I am representing South Florida proudly.
There you
I
go.
can almost fool you into believing that I'm in my South Florida studios.
That's true.
Are you down south?
Nobody knows.
You never know where he may show up.
Yeah. Well, Rumpy, here we are at week 8, finishing week 8, heading into the last week of the regular season. And I think what really is the headline for this weekend is the NE8 isn't decided at all, really. And it's down to 3, and all 3 could still win. And then the SAC is still got some implications in there too. But this has been a fun regular season, and we've got a big Friday night to close things out.
Yeah, we do. And there's still plenty to be sorted out as far as teams wanting to grab their share. There'll be a lot of teams that will be cheering for somebody else this Friday night because, you'll have a lot of Homestead fans out at Carroll and Snyder this week. Probably Carroll not wanting to admit that they're hoping that Homestead wins. But I think you will actually have plenty of support for the Homestead Spartans against Bishop Luers because Snyder and Carroll, their only hope of sharing any part of that victory bell and an SAC championship lies within the Homestead Spartans since they don't have Luers on their schedule and can't take care of their own business. But now you've got the pressure. We keep assuming that the NE8 is a 3-way tie, but hey, everybody's got to take care of an opponent they're expected to beat in week 9. Anybody could stumble and it could cost them a share of an NE8 championship. So, things have gotten pretty exciting. But if you look at what's ahead in some of the matchups coming up this week, you'd expect all 3 of the teams currently tied for first in the NE8 to be heavy favorites. East Noble and New Haven both at home. By the way, did anybody remember East Noble even playing a road game this year? What was the deal? Did they have like a Alabama schedule where they had everybody at home?
They may have.
Well, and I know the Leo loss was at home. So yeah, I mean they've had
they played Luers, Snyder, Leo, New Haven. They've got Belmont this week, and I think they had one other. So I mean, yeah, they had plenty of home
away
up there in Kendallville.
They were at DeKalb, at Norwell, and at Columbia City. So yeah, and they close out with a home game as well. So 8 games, 9 games, 6 home games, 3 road games this season for the East Noble.
That is very seldom ever heard of in high school.
those clever dogs up there getting their schedule worked out the way it was. That was good work by Nick David and Luke Amstutz up there in Kendallville.
Yeah.
Or you could look at it the other way and say, well, next year that's a bad job because they have only 6 road games and only 3 home games.
Unless he's got Calipari helping him schedule games, maybe next year there'll be neutral sites, instead of having to go to the other.
Last year, 6 road games last year for East Noble.
They're
5 and 6 they finish. But yeah, this year it's flipped the script, and I mean, really, it's just unheard of because it's not like it's doing ping ponging back and forth that way each year. It's just the way the schedule fell. But are you surprised? I mean, that these 3 teams are still in it. I mean, there's no clear cut. I mean, the way they beat each other has kind of led to this. But what do we make of having an NE8 race like this coming down to the end of the year?
Didn't we call it from the very beginning of the season? We said that there would be a logjam, that there was no clear-cut favorite. There were a lot of contenders, but they would probably all beat up on each other. And you might end up with as many as 4 teams battling for the top spot when you got to week 9. So I don't think we're surprised by where we're at right now. I thought, we kind of saw a little separation where you had, 4 teams battling at the top. Columbia City has since fallen off. The schedule is kind of stiffened up on the Eagles, and they haven't answered that challenge. But the 3 that are up there at the top, we all thought they had good football teams. I mean, there was a lot of reason to have optimism. All 3 of them, when you look at East Noble, they were bringing back almost their entire roster. When you look at Leo, we knew about Brock Schott and Caden Hurst, and then you have, New Haven with all of their weapons. My goodness, they've got weapons galore. So, the question for New Haven is, would they be consistent enough? Could they defend? And would they be good at the line of scrimmage with their offensive and defensive lines? And they've answered that with a resounding yes this year. So, it's an impressive trio of teams. And I would say that I think, all 3 of those teams could go far in the sectionals, but those dang ping pong balls kind of cost that from happening. So,
yeah, that's kind of one of those sectionals. That's probably got to be one of the most difficult sectionals in the state of Indiana. When you look at it.
Well, and the thing is, you look at the way the brackets are set up.
I know. Yeah.
And you've got basically the strength of the NE8 on the bottom, and you've got the strength of the SAC as far as Class 4A at the top with Dwenger and Wayne. And Dwenger and Wayne will play right off the bat. So one of them is one and done. And then the bottom half of that bracket, East Noble, New Haven. I've been saying since the game ended on Friday, in fact, maybe even before the game ended, that we were going to see a rematch with these 2 teams in the sectional. And I said, the way things work out, it's probably going to be week 1. It's probably going to happen in 2 weeks. And of course, 2 weeks from last Friday is when we're going to see East Noble, New Haven. This time it's going to be at New Haven. And I still don't know exactly the status on Mylan Graham, whether he's going to be available. But obviously that first half against East Noble on Friday, when New Haven fell behind, you could tell there were some chemistry issues in how that offense operated. And those are things you don't expect to see 8 weeks into the season, but there was some mistiming, some communication on some routes. And I think they kind of settled in and they got better as they got into the second half. But I thought we saw how impactful his absence was in that first half when New Haven fell behind. And East Noble then was able to hold on despite those 2 touchdowns in like 17 seconds there at the end that made things kind of interesting.
Yeah, they at that point in time that was over, but it was East Noble just thoroughly dominated the line of scrimmage, and that's going to be something that New Haven's going to have to address heading into the playoffs, is because East Noble really ran what they wanted to run all night and never really had any problems with it until about the latter part of the second half when New Haven started doing some blitzing stuff. But, outside of those 2 conferences, the only conference that we really know who the champion is once again down in Adams County in the league. Instead of calling it the ACAC, you call it the Adams County
Adams Central Athletic Conference. Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, they've been so dominant, they've named the league after them. But you're right, Shannon. We saw that matchup at the line of scrimmage, and that was clearly won by East Noble on Friday night. And one of the things I noticed with that 3-man front that New Haven was running out there, that you could put 3 helmets on those guys, and then when they ran that counter play, when they pulled a guard, he would be able to get to the second level and seal off that second level and seal off that linebacker. Well, you get those East Noble running backs all the way to the third level before they even get touched, and all of a sudden it's 8, 9, 10 yards a carry. And I thought that's what we saw. In a rematch, now that you've seen your defense match up against that offense and you saw what East Noble did to you, I wonder if they'll throw in a wrinkle, maybe show a 4 or 5-man front and say, okay, we're going to line it up this way. You're not going to know exactly, who's coming, who's not coming. and kind of mix it up a little bit and see if Xander Brazel is good enough to beat him through the air. He didn't have to throw very often, but he was pretty impressive when he did.
Oh yeah.
And so that was a fun game. I will, even though it wasn't as close as some of the others we've had, good intensity, a lot at stake. New Haven comes in with that unbeaten record. And that was just a fun game, fun atmosphere to be a part of in Kendallville. And of course, Monroe knows how to throw a good party on a Friday night too. And they've been throwing quite a few of them lately. This time they had to take their party on the road to Bluffton. But, that game stayed fairly close, but it seemed like there was never a doubt that Adams Central was on their way to winning. They're just so good on both sides of the football that even if the offense maybe isn't clicking on all cylinders, or you get a defense that's taking something away from them, they have time. They can buy time with that great defense to figure out, because they can get the possessions that they need to make the offensive adjustments to eventually put the points up that end up with a 24-point separation by the time the night's over. And that's just what Adams Central, that's why, where's their weakness? How do you beat them? Because generally every team, you try to find that Achilles heel, something you can take away that maybe makes them vulnerable.
Yeah, right. And outside of of that that conference being kind of sewn up as we go into this last week, 1380 game of the week this week will be the Lures Homestead game. What do you think Lures is going to have to do to win this outright? Now, we haven't had the opportunity to see them this year, but they've kind of caught fire here the last 3 or 4 weeks where they've done some things to win some close games and put themselves in a position to have this opportunity Friday. And their biggest competition was probably Northside, just because Northside's athletes versus Lures. And then you bring in DeWanger the next week, you find a way to win that in overtime. This team right now just seems like they have a lot of confidence in what they're doing. But what do you think they're going to have to do in order to beat a Homestead, just being that Homestead's that higher classification of school? And we could sit here and talk about why that's a lopsided affair.
Well, number one, my alma mater apparently didn't get my memo that you've got to stop Brett Fox. That would be number one. You can't let him run for 400 yards against you. He had a phenomenal game against Concordia, but you've got to contain Fox. You've got to put Homestead into some difficult down and distance situations. If you let Fox run 5, 6, 7 yards every time, there's no sweat, no pressure. They can pass when they want to run a play action pass, and it's difficult to stop. But if you can put them in those 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11 situations, it seems like occasionally White will get a little nervous, can't pull the trigger quite quick enough, tries to escape and scramble, and teams have been able to collapse the pocket on him. But so number one, I think defensively, to keep yourself in the game, you've got to take away Homestead's running game. Number two, I do think they're probably going to have to, at some point, trust McKenzie to be able to throw the football. He's a guy that started a little bit rough, but as he's gained experience, he's improved, and they've kind of grown more confidence in the passing game, and they've got a couple of really good receivers. Isaac Zay, the wideout, we saw him last year. He's a great target, big target as a wideout. And so, I think they're going to have to be able to have a lot of balance and be able to kind of toss the football around a little bit to be able to consistently move it against Homestead. But I wonder if this, in all reality, Lures has their share, and I wonder where their focus will be come Friday. There's no question that Bishop Lures is setting themselves up for a bigger stage in Class 2A. Do they come with the focus of the SAC title and we don't want to share it? Or do they come with kind of an attitude that, hey, let's not get hurt and be healthy next week when we start our tournament run? If they come and they play with their peak energy and they're focused, they've got a chance, I think, to compete with Homestead. If they don't bring their A game and they get caught peeking ahead, I think Homestead's got a distinct advantage in this one.
Yeah, I mean, we go through this every year, and that's why it's kind of nice in some respects is that you still got that meaningful game on Friday because of what's chasing you from behind. And that's the same way with the NE8 in that regard, because they all have an opportunity to be, tri champs. But yeah, it's a good question when it comes to this time of year. I think we've always wondered, with some schools, when you get into this last week, mindset of coaches and stuff. But I got a suspicion that Coach Lindsay is going to want to win it outright and not give, Carroll and Snyder any opportunity to,
he's not a 15-year-old mind though, or a 16-year-old mind. I mean, there's no doubt. I think coaches want to go out there and compete and win every week. And the other thing you don't want to do is if you let up, that you lose your momentum that you've got going into postseason. So I think, Coach Lindsay is going to do everything he can to have his team ready. I'm just saying from a player's perspective, do the players exhale? Remember, they had those two butt whoopings those first 2 weeks, and they came back, and now they've won every single week since. That's put them in a position where they're no worse than a co-champion or tri-champion of the SAC. And to me, they've got a great opportunity here in 2A to really make some noise. And I look at that sectional, and I honestly don't think there's anyone in that sectional. Even East Side, I think, is going to have a tough time against Lures.
Yeah.
And that game would be at Lures. So, it's just a question of what Lures' motivation is for the locker room, not necessarily the coaching staff, but it's the locker room where you get the motivation. I think coaches can rah-rah all they want. No offense, Shannon. I'm sure you rah-rah with the best of them. But the reality is, I think the real motivation for teams comes from your senior leadership and from the guys in that locker room that make sure every single teammate looks them in the eye and is ready to play.
Yeah.
We'll see if Lures has that Friday.
Last question here. And me and Dude have kind of bantered this back and forth all year, but now that the divisions, they went with the divisional alignment this year, and now we've got a potential outright champion, potentially with Lures, without having to play the two other of the best teams in the conference this year. Is there any changes that you would make to the divisional lineup, or it is what it is? They want the two non-conference games, and this is what you're just going to have to live with, that this could happen, and probably will happen if you look at it from the perspective of, like a Lures running the table or a Northside running the table, because each one of these teams is going to have a chance some year that they're not going to have to play a Snyder or a Carroll.
Yeah, and you never know what the schedule is going to bring. I mean, maybe Snyder or Carroll have a down year at some point. I mean, to me, here's the thing. For years and years, everybody wanted the non-conference games. Now those same people are wanting to come back and say, well, Lures, they're getting the advantage. They're not playing Snyder and Carroll. It's like, just shut up already. You can't have both. If you're going to play If you're going to play two non-conference games, you're going to have to not play two SAC opponents. I think what they did in aligning this so that, a lot of the bigger schools play each other, I think they should. And I have no problem with where we're at right now, because you have to remember, for Lures to be 6-0, they still have to be three teams on that other side that are all much bigger than them. And Lures is the smallest school on their side. So every team they've got to beat is a bigger classification school
Yep.
So don't give me any of this, they were handed a championship because of their schedule. I'll joke about it, but the reality is, I don't want to take anything away from Bishop Luers. Everybody they play in the conference is a bigger classification. In fact, you've got, you've got 3A, 4A. I mean, you go through their
Yeah.
schedule, they got a 6A, a 4A, a 3A, a 5A. I mean, right down the line, everybody's much bigger than them. And hey, they survived that, and they deserve, if they're able to go through that schedule and not have a blemish, I think they deserve to have the SAC championship.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we've talked about is, look, you can't have your cake and eat it too. It's either one or the other, and everybody wants those non-conference games, and to a man, that's what they decided to do. However this ends up, it is what it is, and it still comes down to win your games, and you don't have to worry about this situation. Snyder really lost a game to Homestead that they probably really shouldn't have lost in that Friday night, had it, turned out the way they thought it was going to turn out. But that's why you got to play the teams in front of you each and every week, and hopefully Luers can take care of business on Friday night and finish it up with an undefeated conference record. But we shall see. Unfortunately, I won't be with you Friday. I know that's going to hurt you.
I know. We have to end the season without you, but I figured at some point Friday, Griff, you would get me going on the seeding of the tournament and why it needs to be done, and have my chance to really let loose. But I'll have to save it for another time.
I'll have to tweet at you or something while I'm down in Southern Indiana and get you going. No, I've been looking at some of these brackets already, and I just shake my head.
We've got so much technology. We've got so many ways. I mean, every game is streamed or on the radio. I mean, you get to know these kids. The media coverage is outstanding. We've gotten to a point where, whether it's computerized, whether it's, coaches that put together some kind of vote, and I'm not even saying you have to seed every single team in every single sectional, but I don't think it's fair that you have some of the top teams playing each other in an opening round game. For instance, a South Adams and an Adams Central. There's a lot of teams in there that South Adams obviously would match up much better against than having to play Adams Central right out of the gate. You also have the NHC versus NHC matchups. You have a couple of SAC versus SAC. You might still have those, but my problem is that the regular season should mean something. I mean, whatever. I mean, right now it means absolutely nothing. If we didn't play a regular season, we'd still be having these same teams playing these same teams in the same spots in the bracket. And, I know Friday night I talked to Michael Mosier, the coach of Adams Central, and I agree with him that there's two things. One, the top two teams should be seeded, so they're the top team in each of the half brackets. So, you get number one at the top, number two in the bottom, and then fill in the rest. And then the other thing is, I think through the tournament, and this is something I don't know that it's been discussed enough, but I think through the tournament, home team should be the team that's ranked higher in Sagarin. And I think that if you've earned through the course of your season a higher Sagarin rating than an opponent who pulls off some upset in a sectional or something, I think you still should be rewarded with home games. There's no reason a team should go on the road. What was it? Carroll had to go on the road like 3 straight weeks to open the tournament play last year.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to do that. I mean, Carroll's an undefeated team last year, and they had to go on the road for their opening sectional game, on the road for the sectional championship, and back on the road for a regional. That should not happen. If you've earned it through the season, you should be able to play games in front of your fans and not have to travel. That's my opinion.
Well, and you're right. And I think what Coach Mosier suggests is more logical than anything of declaring a one and a two of each bracket, and going from there, because that would be a lot simpler than trying to seed the whole first round of teams. But hopefully we can only hope. We can only hope.
Or draw the buys first. Draw the buys and say the teams that are, if you have a losing record, you don't. I mean, now I did not see any winless teams get a bye outside of 6 and 5A, which only has everybody gets a bye technically, so to speak. But I mean, when you have a matchup, I think it's that one with West Noble and Lakeland in there where they're on the same side of the bracket, and on the other side, it's like two teams that are like 2 and 8 in there, and they're like the winner.
Knox and West
Yeah,
Noble that wouldn't meet until sectional. They're both unbeaten.
And I get the idea is supposed to be it's random, and so that's going to happen, so to speak. But man, it's just like,
Well, the one that doesn't make any sense either is Snyder. Northside gets the bye, and Snyder's playing Anderson week 1.
Though, Shannon, I wonder if Coach Tipman really wants 2 weeks off.
Well, probably not.
I mean that gives you 3 weeks from game to game.
That's true too.
That is a heck of a long break.
Yeah, that's true too, which doesn't help anybody, I guess. So you're probably right in that regard.
Then you got Sectional 27 there on the screen with, 2 winless teams. I mean, that's the other side of it is too, I think by virtue of everybody making the tournament, which is some ways unique to Indiana, at least in our area, at least in the Midwest, perhaps, everybody makes it in. And there have been times, I mean, look at Concordia, top half that bracket, winless every, I don't know a whole lot about Yorktown, but they can make it through to the sectional championship and face off against Heritage. You have a Concordia Heritage matchup. I'm not so sure that's not a coin flip. I mean, in some ways. There, I said it. Maybe not this year, but I mean, but there have been those times where teams go on a run, and I mean, Belmont winless goes through that NE8 conference, and now they draw Garrett. I think that's a winnable game for a team like Belmont. You know what I'm saying?
We've seen a number of teams that go through the seasons either winless, or I think did Norwell do it once? Belmont did it once. I mean, we've seen teams go winless and make it to a sectional championship just by virtue of favorable matchups.
Right.
And you play in some of these tough conferences like the NE8 and the SAC, and it kind of gives you that opportunity. But, we could go on and on about how these things are all matched up. But what I don't like to see is, before you get to the championship, you're seeing the 2 best teams knocking themselves out.
Yeah.
And some, 500 team gets a better bracket and gets all the way to a championship. Because the other thing too, let the kids, that have earned it have a longer season.
Right.
Why should a team that gets an unfavorable first round matchup have to put up their, Bluffton 6-2? They're taking on Alexandria 7-1. Now, I don't know much about Alexandria, but there's a team that's going to consider their season a real success during the regular season, and one of them is going to be turning in equipment after the very first sectional game. Before Class 5A and 6A even start, you're going to have a really good 2A team that ends up giving up their equipment, and then you've got that Blackford and
Tipton. And that's 2 top 10 teams that could there again, not a whole lot about Alexandria, but conceivably, if they're number 8 in the rankings and Bluffton had been 6, I mean, you're looking at a potential for a semi-state matchup in the first round, which that's just the way it goes. But then you look at like Indianapolis Lutheran down here, that they've got a pretty easy path to it, where they've got the bye. They're the number 1 team. They got the bye, and all these teams that, on the top half, the only team that is above, that's really good is at the top half in South Putnam. And so, and then they get the regional winner of, probably in sectional 48 and come out of that. So it is always interesting to see every year. My theory is if we can have the coaches and the media vote on who the top 10 teams are in each class, then we could probably figure out a way to seed these tournaments. I mean, which that's a whole nother topic. The idea that we can even rank team, like how are Fort Wayne media, no disrespect to them, gonna sit there and try to rank Evansville teams? You know what I'm saying? Because
that's where we trust the Sagarin ratings to
yeah.
to calculate strength of schedules and the power of each region. But again, the Sagarin does put a number to every team in the state, and it does give you some gauge or some measurement as to which team is rated by the computers to be the better team. And
yeah,
somehow I think that could be used. But we'll live with it for another year, and it does give us some high profile matchups like each week of the tournament. Yep. So for as far as us doing a game of the week, we don't have to wait until the sectional championship before we get a worthy game. But it still would be nice if you could separate number 1 and number 2.
Yeah, and geography always comes into play too. I mean, when you have Wabash and East Side and Lures all together, it's like they probably look at those schedules and go, Lures again?
Well, how do you feel? How do you think Fisher's teams with Fisher's and Hamilton Southeastern feel? They both drew to come to Fort Wayne. So we're going to have.
Well, if you're Hamilton Southeastern playing Northrop, you're probably like, okay. I mean, honestly, and Fisher's is another good 5-3 team. Well, Brett, it was a great to talk to you tonight, and there's always plenty to talk about when it comes to high school football, even though we're at the end of the regular season and conference matchups wrapping up and sectionals on the horizons. And we appreciate you joining us tonight on Upon Further Review. And of course, we will see you out at Friday night at Homestead for the 1380 The Fan Game of the Week as Bishop Lures faces Homestead. Kickoff at 7. Shannon won't be there, even though he's in the graphic. But you will be there, and then Jim and I will be on for 6 o'clock with the pregame show, and then of course the post game at the Coventry Pizza Hut.
I appreciate it, guys. And by the way, if you've got the airbrush people that work like on Instagram and stuff, could you take about 20 pounds off both Rick and I in that graphic?
There you go.
20.
Thanks, guys.
40. See ya.
All right.